So I couldn't see you there behind all of tonight's notes. This week I went back and looked at 8 habits I had. It's only 7 habits. As we know, recording Frederica is stupid when I used to prep way too much for every session, when I was a chronic overprepper. Each of these individually is fine, sometimes for some sessions. But if you're doing this for every session, if you're doing more than 3 of these for every session, you're probably overprepping. Number 1, never reusing maps, NPCs, villains between games. I thought that was completely normal. I thought every DM made completely new NPCs, villains, maps, all of the above. I know it's crazy if you're someone like me who's moved on from that. It's so easy to reuse an NPC. If the heroes never interact with them, you just move them over to the next town. Or if you're running 2 games, you reuse NPCs between games, you reuse entire towns. But I was in this mindset for a long time that was somehow not building the world, that I needed to take every opportunity to in-depth my world so that any player could go anywhere, except because I was constantly building new stuff, it wasn't like I was world building, I was just making the same stuff up over and over again for no reason. Looking back, this one wasn't a mindset shift, I just realized eventually that I was being silly. I can just prep stuff and reuse it. That's the point of writing towns down. The main thing I can help you, if you're listening to this and this is somehow a groundbreaking idea, which I hope it isn't, the best thing I can tell you is to use a system like Notion or Obsidian or a well-organized Google Docs system where you can find notes again. I've started tagging every NPC with their profession, their organization, the town they're in, so that if I'm looking for a member of the Thieves Guild, I can find that. If I'm looking for a carpenter, I can find an NPC I've written for that, or a blacksmith, I can find an NPC for that. Once you get that going, it can be very easy to just build out an entire town by collecting 15 NPCs that you wrote 3 years ago. Number 2, trying to prep every possible thing the players could do. When I first started prepping, the way I would prep would be, okay, here's the room the players go into. They can either fight the monster or they can talk to the monster. So what happened? I prep what would happen if they fight and what happens if they talk. Well, then I had the first time a player decided to sneak through the room by turning invisible. So then I'd prep, are the villains prepared for that? Are the monsters able to see that? Does this monster have true sight? And then I'd have a player who tried to lure the monster out of the room. So then I'd write how to look, what would happen if that happens. And so as a DM, you will see more and more different things that could possibly happen. And before you know it, you're going to be prepping like 20 things for each scenario. And by definition, the players are only going to do one of them. I know so many DMs who get stuck in that habit for so long. They just keep prepping and prepping and prepping. And it's like, I understand that that is important. I understand that it's an important step in every DM's process, but believe me when I tell you, there are better ways to prep. The easiest one, the mindset change that happened for me is, instead of prepping what I thought the villain might do if the players do X, I simply started prepping what the villain wants. Once you know what the villain wants, anything the players do just becomes a question of how does the villain react to this to continue to get what they want. If they're trying to destroy a town and the heroes cause a blockade on the road, they're going to clear the blockade. If the players destroy the bridge they're using, they're going to go find another bridge or go around. If the players sneak through their camp, they're going to, hopefully once they notice them, try and stop them, capture them, find out what information they have. All of that is very hard the first time you do it. You don't know what information a villain needs to be able to react. But once you get to know your players and your world and how you like to run, you'll start to know what you need to know about a villain. For me, it's just their goal. I just need their goal and an understanding of their personality. If the villain is like a micromanager who gets really mad at you for having creative ideas, then when they see the players, they're not going to respond by being creative. They're going to respond by trying to do what won't get them in trouble. If that makes sense, trying to respond the way they think their boss would want them to, or in the way they were trained, or the simplest way. If the villain is like a creative type who gives their lackeys a lot more freedom, or there's some sort of force of nature, then I will have the monsters respond in a more creative way in that moment. The players have blown up a bridge. Oh, they're going to be creative. They're going to rebuild the bridge. That kind of understanding of how your villain works, but also their lackeys and underlings and commanders work, can really help you react in those situations organically. Number 3, prepping the entire plot line before the first session. I don't know who needs to hear this, but if you are prepping the entire plotline, every scene from start to finish, this will happen, and this will happen, and this will happen, and this will happen, one of 2 things is going to happen. A, you're going to waste a lot of prep because the players at some point are going to do something you didn't expect, and you're going to feel the need for a new plot. Or 2, you're going to railroad your players. There are worlds where something might happen and they go off the plotline and then they come back to it later. That's good. But I'm here to tell you, you don't need to do this. You can prep as you go. As long as you know what the beginning is, you have the first 2 sessions so you don't accidentally mess up and try to work a session ahead so you've got enough prep in case you misjudge things. As long as you have that and what the villains want to do, you can kind of roll with the punches. You can go along with the plot line. It's similar to prepping situations, but it doesn't have to be for a plot. I like to think of it in a plotting sense of preparing Act 1 and preparing Act 3, right? Then let the players find out what happens in Act 2. If the players are really stupid and very successful in Act 2 but do it in stupid ways, then Act 3 is going to be the fall. And we might need another story after that. If the heroes are really, really dumb in Act 2 and do crazy, silly things, then Act 3 will probably, end of Act 2 will look like them getting punished, and then going into Act 3, they'll succeed again. That kind of plotting is really simple. And I think the thing to remember here is that you're telling a collaborative story with your players. You're not some kind of Mbappe dictator who has to control every aspect of the game. Give your players freedom. They will come up with cool stuff you couldn't have thought of. And yeah, when you first do this, your players are probably going to be quite bad at it. It will be new to them. They're not used to having that freedom. But after I started to give them more and more freedom, I stopped prepping entire games where they just had to follow along with the clues. They started to have more fun. They started to engage in the world. They thought of it as more real. And maybe you want that super narrative story where you prep everything out step by step by step, but don't prep the entire thing all at once. Even if you do that, you might come up with better ideas. Your players might come up with better ideas. Give yourself space to find out the story as you go along. Prep parts of it, maybe prep a couple of scenes throughout, but don't prep it right down to this encounter will happen here and this encounter will happen here and this is the montage test and this is a negotiation. That kind of stuff really bogs down your prep and takes a while. You don't have to do that to yourself. Okay, similar to the first one, I used to prep every NPC in every town. I did this as recently as when I started running Draw Steel last year. I used to go through and think about give the name, profession, and family relation of every NPC in every town. I don't know why I did this. I could not tell you. I was crazy. What can I say? It wasn't my smartest moment. If you do this, you don't have to do this. A good rule of thumb for me is you need to prep between 5 and 7 NPCs for a town to feel real. You need just enough that the players start to forget and struggle to remember all the names. That's what I've learned. But you don't need 20 names. 20 names will never come up. You don't need that. You need like 5 of them. Typically, you need one NPC who shares values with the players and one NPC who's really anti the values of the players, and the other ones fill in the spectrum in the middle. That works quite well to give the heroes something to do, something interesting to happen. But you don't need to prep all of them. You definitely don't need to be doing an AD&D and prepping where everyone's gold is in the town and all of this stuff. No, don't do that to yourself. You have been saved. Number 5. When I used to prep Sandboxing adventures, I thought the way you did this was you prepped 5 entire adventures from start to finish and put them in the world around your town so that you knew exactly what would happen if the players went to any of the 5 adventures you'd given on the map. That's not how you do it. Prep a starting adventure. Assume the first session there will be a quest given immediately. Don't throw them into the sandbox straight away. They won't have fun. During the course of that adventure, hint at one other quest, and then at the end of that adventure, particularly this will be useful if they don't like it, offer 3 other quests. Just prep the hints. And then this is the key thing. At the end of that first session, tell the players, hey, I need you to select which of these quests you want to do so I can have it perfect next week. I've never met a group of players who are like, no, we want to prep next week. You have to prep all 5. They understand that that's what's happening. And if they change their mind between now and next week and they go, actually, no, we want to do this other thing, then that's totally reasonable for you to say, okay, cool. Well, maybe you've prepped some like travel content so you can use that content up. But if they get to the front of the dungeon, then it's nothing. The other way I've done this, if I want to be a little bit more in depth, if I want a slightly even more open world experience, is I will prep the first encounter of each of those quest lines. So I'll know, here are the 5 quest lines. Here is how they'll each start. I know vaguely what the middle and end is. Here's the very first encounter, or the first kind of hour of gameplay, so that if the players, the timings of that first adventure takes a little bit too long, so they kind of finish it at the start of the second session, then they pick something to do, then they go on to the next thing. That's how I'll do it, but I don't need to know how the middle and end will be. I can figure that out once they get there. We'll do the first session in the new adventure line, then I'll finish it off. All I need to know is what I'm kind of trying to set up so that I can improvise it. Well, not improvise it, but I can, in that first session, if I know what the ending's going to be, I can do the foreshadowing I need to do. I need to do all the narrative stuff. As long as I know vaguely, I don't need to have the whole thing prepped out. And that means instead of you needing to prep 5 adventures, 4 of which you might never use, depending on how the story goes, you can prep nothing and then only prep the ones you use. And that other prep doesn't go away that you did. The knowledge of what those other 5 quests would be can come back later, Recently in one of my games, my party are currently fighting a war, and very early on in the game, they completely ignored a quest line about a town being attacked by zombies. It'd be really useful now if they could have that town as an ally, but that town's dead and they're all zombies now. It's over for them. 6. I can't believe I did this. I can't believe that I used to write long backstories for every single NPC I ran. It's wild to me that I used to do that. Do you know how much work that is and how repetitive it gets? Trying to come up with unique NPCs every single time is brutal, and it doesn't even help you run complex towns. Having one 3-dimensional NPC is great, but trying to run a town of 20 of them, the players just get overwhelmed so quickly. So no, don't prep 3-dimensional NPCs every single time. But if you do want to prep a 3-dimensional NPC, check out, I think it's the 5th or 6th tip in last week's video. So number 8 is kind of a specific example, but spending 3 hours prepping how poisons work. I don't know when I stopped doing this, but I used to be really obsessed with how things had to work like they do in real life. If an NPC wanted to poison something, they would have had to grow poison somewhere in their lair and then make it so the heroes could figure it out. Not even for like mystery adventures, just like normal dungeon crawls or fights, I would get really obsessed over this stuff. It's just weird, man. Like, it's a fantasy world. You can just make up some cool magic stuff. You don't have to ground it in reality. And the other issue of trying to ground your game in realism is your players, there's 5 of them, they're always going to know topics you don't know. Like I once had a player tell me, why aren't the skeletons covered in blood? And I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, oh, well, when bone marrow decays, it breaks open holes in the bones because it expands and then covers the bones in blood. That's what happens to actual bones in real life. And I was like, what? And it's like, that's not the fantasy. I don't want to run a super gory game where every time the players interact with a skeleton, I'm describing blood having oozed out of the bones at some point and then being like red rust colored. That would be a lot for just a kind of sometimes cartoonish fight with some skeletons. Anytime you find yourself prepping, like researching for 3 hours or something can be really fun. Like sometimes when you're prepping a town and you just want to remember how tectonic plates work so you can prep the region map with accurate geographical information, go for it. I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying it's a lot of work for not always the most amount of gain. This is more of a sometimes food than a don't do. If you enjoyed this video, there's a link on the right hand side of your screen to my Drawing the Steel playlist. It's a series of videos about running the game and specifically draw steel, but it works for all TTRPGs really. And if you want more updates on what's going on with the channel, click over to the Patreon. I write a weekly newsletter over there and run a Q&A. So if you want information about what's actually going on with the channel and what's happening and if I'm on Goblin Panel this week and when the next video will be, go check out that. The newsletters are completely for free.